Alright, what's good, y'all? It's your boy Jay back at it again, and today we got the death of masculinity has to be studied by the Poor Man's Podcast. You already know what the deal is, man. 100K on both J's here and J's there by the end of the year. And without further ado, let's get started.
The death of masculinity in the West in the last 30 years has to be studied, and in history it is going to be seen as a tragedy how masculinity was willing to just roll over and decay in some of the best nations the world has ever seen. But here we are now. Either way, there are still some guys left that got that energy, that love to protect and provide, that love women, that love society, that love tradition, that are still masculine and do it with grace and make it look easy, even though it's one of the hardest things to do. Let's go ahead and get right into the video.
So I wanted to return to a comment you made earlier about the generation of lost boys. You likened them to the Peter Pan movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when we're talking about Red Pill media as being a large influence, and I wanted to define that. It's a reference to the Matrix, in which a lot of these media heads talk about unplugging yourself, and it's about waking up to the realization that there is an active attack on masculinity, that men's rights need to be
definitely right. For the last 30 years, we're seeing Peter Pans, which, if you don't know what the Peter Pan syndrome is, it's guys that grow older but never grow up, is what I'm trying to get at. Because guys from a young age, they're demonized in school. They're not allowed to even do typical boy behavior, right? The education system is way more shifted to women than it is to men. I mean, I know a lot of guys who were, sent to the principal's office or got in trouble for drawing swords in war, or just, standing up on their own, right, to use the restroom. You can't do that. You have to ask to use the restroom, which I think is stupid, because no 17 or 18-year-old should have to ask to use the restroom. You're almost a legal adult. You should be able to just go on your own accord, right? But no, you have to do that. It's very tightly regulated. You can't have much personal freedom in a lot of these classrooms, right? It's very strict, and it continues into, other parts of life, right? A lot of these young dudes are finding themselves in positions like they can't get a job, they're struggling to find girls, or to even have a long-term relationship. The welfare system that started to become prevalent in the 60s and 70s basically made it so that the state could be the man for the woman, right? Which means that men are even more disincentivized to work and provide for a woman. And it also doesn't help that a lot of the men's work, right, is going into this welfare system that's paying for these girls who aren't working. So you're having a system in which guys are having to pay for a lot of these girls, right? And it's mostly single moms and whatnot, but they're paying for welfare, which is mostly dominated by women, and they're not getting any benefit from that, right? So a lot of their money that should be going to them or helping the community is going into people that, some might need it, some might not, but regardless, it's going into these people that aren't working, right? So that also contributes to that as well. And it also doesn't help that guys are just demonized, right? A lot. How many times have you heard the phrase, I don't need a man? We don't need men. What are men good for, right? That's been a growing sentiment for the past 2 decades, right?
That men are being oppressed in a way, and that men's rights need to be advocated for. Many people have attributed the Red Pill media to rise in this almost generation of lost boys. I kind of wanted to get your opinion on do you see this generation of lost boys as a failure of, say, masculinity, or are there potential other factors, economic, social factors, such as, the death of the American dream, increasing costs of living in America, increased costs of education?
Good question.
Are there any other reasons as to why this generation of lost boys might exist, or do you basically attribute it to
I acknowledge all of that, of course.
People are obese because they're eating horrible food. There's a lack of sleep because people are addicted to their cell phones. Niggas don't punch no more. They not getting no vitamin D. Masculinity is an absolute crisis. Sperm count is down 60%. And since 1979, the average man has been losing 1% testosterone each year. A 25-year-old man now has about 20% less testosterone on average than a man his same age in 1979. You want to feel more masculine and energetic, and you don't want to be as depressed, you start by getting good sleep.
You want to be more, like he's saying, if you want to be more energetic and masculine, number one, focus on your sleep. Have a consistent sleep schedule. This is something that I've struggled with in the past, but Go to sleep and wake up at the same time. Wake up at the same time every day. For me, that's 6. 6 is the time where, regardless of what I do or what I, have to do for the day, it's a time that I can wake up at consistently, get work done, and be productive. Wake up at the same time every day. I cannot stress this enough. When you fuck with your sleep, you're fucking with your hormones and your energy, right? This is why a lot of dudes feel tired and lethargic. Secondly, go outside more. Play a sport, whether that be football, soccer, rugby, whatever you want to play. Track as well. And even if it's an indoor sport like basketball or like water polo or something like that, you're still getting exercise and you're still building a community. You're still building camaraderie, which are traits that every man should have in some degree, right? Thirdly, stop beating the meat. You got to stop doing that shit. Hop on semen retention, hop on NoFap, stop watching porn. It clogs your brain, makes you, less happy, reduces the gray matter in your brain, contributes significantly to the demonization of women, because guys who watch a lot of porn, they view women as sex objects, which is a terrible way to view the opposite sex. And it's just a massive waste of time and energy, right? I found that the longer I retain and the less porn I watch, the more clear-headed I am, the more motivated I am to work, and the more confident I am. And it's just an increase in life, right? Fourth, exercise. This ties into the sports thing earlier. Exercise. Hit the gym, right? It's going to make you stronger. It's going to increase your testosterone. You're going to look better. You're going to feel better. Everything of that nature, right?
By exercising. That is base existence, by the way. Every human has exercised every day throughout all of human history, and now it's just an option. It's not really an option. If you want to live base human existence, you should be exercising every day. You need to be exercising. You need a good sleep routine. Don't be obese, and that's where you start. You're base level human once you start doing those things, and then you could build.
One of them, it's a very good faith question. Thank you. In America, we made a stupid decision in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s to shut down our factories in the middle part of the country.
Right.
We did.
Basically disinfect.
We made a terrible idea to outsource labor to Indonesia, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, mostly those countries. And what happened is that a lot of these guys, right, their labor, like let's say you have to pay the average American worker, like, I don't know, $20 an hour. Well, now you can just pay the average worker in Bangladesh or India $2 or even less than that. So a lot of these factories and companies moved overseas, and that led to a lack of jobs, a lack of employment in these cities, right? Look what happened to Detroit. Look what happened to the entire area around the Great Lakes, right? The Rust Belt. Pennsylvania and Detroit in the 40s and 50s were massive manufacturing industries, right? They were some of the biggest cities in the whole country. They were massive, huge populations. Look at them now. Philadelphia has some of the highest opioid use and murder rates of any major American city, and Detroit, I believe, has the highest murder rate out of any major American city, or it's at least up there, right? People are leaving these cities in droves because of the lack of work, the uptake in crime, and the lack of care to the city and the residents that live in it. America did these companies did it out of greed, right? So they made this greedy decision to outsource labor, which led to a lot of men not being able to get jobs. And with the rise of the feminist movement, right, in the whole, rights for women, which I'm not saying that women don't deserve rights, right? I think that it was good that women have the option to work. They have the option to vote. These are good things. However, right, it was taken to a fever pitch in which the welfare state came in and basically acted like a husband for a lot of girls, meaning that a lot of guys' money, right, the money that they were working for, had to go into that. So that would even disincentivize guys to work even more. And you combine that with outsourcing, and these are both happening in a similar era, you get an issue where a lot of guys are just not making enough money. And it also doesn't help that girls are now entering the workforce in massive droves, which is a good thing. However, right, it's good in the sense that women have the choice to work, because the housewife system was not gonna work anymore. The size of the family had decreased, right? And the labor of being a housewife was significantly less, labor intensive, right? It was way easier with the invention of the refrigerator, the dishwasher, the vacuum. Being a housewife was way more easy since you had less kids to take care of. And it was way easier to just do your chores, right? And the things you needed to do. So they entered the workforce in mass droves, and this, right, also meant that men were competing with women and other men. So that means their pay was even less bountiful than it was a couple decades back. Then you mix in, right, the massive rise of digitalization. So guys are going to be on their phones more, and the rise of dating apps. And since women date up, women want a guy that's superior than them. Now they're just choosing these top of the line guys who have the most money, the best looks, the best status, and things of that nature. So a lot of guys are just being completely left out. And a lot of guys are seeing this and experiencing it, and that's how we get Peter Pan syndrome, where a lot of these dudes are just opting completely out of dating women, completely opted out of school, completely out of work, and they're just living with their parents, playing the game all day.
Tries to industrialize tens of millions of working class men and tell them to go move to the cities and learn to code.
If you're an American, that should be upsetting to you. If you're a man, that should be upsetting to you.
That was a terrible idea. They basically just said, fuck all men, right? Fuck all the working class men. Go move to the cities and code.
Man, these places were booming. You talk about Detroit. You talk about Motown.
Detroit, Motown, Philadelphia.
Talk about Philadelphia. When we had all of these places and these companies were here, they depended on the people here, and the moment they had the opportunity to globalize just to save a couple of dollars, they abandoned the people in those cities. Those cities are now ghost towns, and they moved those jobs overseas just to make a little bit of profit. They abandoned the people of this country, and they were allowed to for the sake of profit. And that's why men need to start learning to be a little bit more self-reliant, a little bit more modest, and start to pull back from these companies because they're not dependable.
This is why a lot of guys are picking up YouTube and entrepreneurship, and a lot of guys are going to trade school, right? If you haven't seen the recent data, men are dropping out of college or just choosing not to go. It's not because college isn't fun or things like that. It's because, number one, it's way more expensive than it was for your parents, and out of worlds more expensive than it was for your grandparents. Secondly, right, I already said that education, I believe the education system is more favored towards women, with how micromanaged it is, with how just like you can't even do anything. Like, there's people who are able to drive that have to ask you the restroom, right? You can't even have your phones in school, which I think is ridiculous. You should be able to have access to your communication device, right? You're old enough to make your own decisions, but the school says, no. We have to play big babysitter for you, so no phone. It's like daycare to an extent, if you want to call it that. But thirdly, right, it's also the fact that a lot of these guys are saying, I'm going into $200,000 worth of debt to get a damn bachelor's degree, and then I have to hope that I can get a job with how many people are competing for jobs, and then hope it doesn't go to a woman or an immigrant or even AI in the near future. And now you're telling me that I may not even want to do this job, right? It's a lot of factors going into why men are just dropping out.
Replace us with immigrants. The moment they can replace us with AI, they will, and they have. I think that men as a whole traded in the skills that made us independent, like farming, like being able to build a house, carpentry, all those different skills, in order to depend on white-collar institutions that are soul-crushing. And now because we don't have the independence, because we traded in our skills, we are now dependent on this white-collar, ultra-feminine culture. I'm not exempting this, by the way.
And tell them to go move to the cities and learn to code.
Right.
I said this in the previous Q&A, but I can again, which is that a family used to be able to be supported on a single income of 30.
A single income. You could work as a mechanic. Make more than enough money for your family. Work as a construction worker, more than enough money for your family. Office worker, more than enough money for your family. Even if you worked like an entry job, like a cashier, you could make, I wouldn't say you could make more than enough to support your family, but as a cashier, you could have a decent amount of money in your pocket. Be able to pay off college, eat out once in a while. You were living fairly good off just one salary. Now there's couples who are working 2 jobs and can barely afford an apartment, because how expensive stuff has gotten, how the rise of living has just exponentially engulfed the cost of labor.
5 weeks of labor a year. Now it takes upwards of 60 weeks of labor a year. However, given all the economic and social and all those factors, the largest of all of them is the cultural and the educational that has infantilized men and hyper-feminized them in the messaging.
Listen, if you want to ruin a society, make nudity and sex common among the young ages. Make that common. And as America, we've done that, and look how fucked dating is now. Look how messed up it is.
The outreach and
you look anywhere on social media, dating is this, dating is that, men and women this. Like, I guarantee you, if we had like social media back in the day, it would cause issues, but it wouldn't have been this bad.
And so I can give you specific examples,
In what way has the education system infantilized men?
Look at how you dress, brother. And I know that's an unpopular take. You don't got to run to the comments because I already know it's an unpopular take, but look at how you dress. You're at Oxford. Are you not inspired by the tradition? Are you not inspired by the history that's around you? The work that people put in to build this building where great debates have been happening since the construction of the building? Do you not want to put yourself together in a way that reflects the history of the place that you're in?
Yeah, this is a crazy fit to wear. I peeped the way he was dressing, but this is an Oxford debate stadium. I think that if I'm going anywhere formal, right? If I'm going anywhere formal, I'm wearing, if it's on a high-end, full suit, like what this man has on right here. If it's just if it's like a Oxford debate or lawyer, like I'm going there intentionally, I'm most likely going to wear a nice dress-up shirt, like a white tee or a polo shirt, some jeans or some khakis, and some dress shoes. This man is wearing slides, a baggy t-shirt, and some joggers. Now, I've worn a fit similar to this in school, not the shirt, but just the shirt, the joggers, and the slides. But wearing this at Oxford Stadium or Oxford Debate Center is wild to me. It's because we've demonized so many things, man.
Stay in my house with a hoodie on, I got jeans on, and I have my tennis shoes on while in my house when I work because it makes me feel more productive. How you dress reflects how you feel. It affects how you feel.
Definitely. I feel like if you're wearing a more kind of professional outfit, you're going to work better, right? That's why some dudes, when they're working, they could just be in the crib chilling. They'll wear a hoodie, some actual pants, and some shoes, right? Because I feel like when you're just working in pajama pants all day, you feel sleepy.
I'm ready. I go into a Walmart sometimes and I see grown men in Cookie Monster pajamas. And then they got on Crocs.
I'm not. I don't wear pajamas in Walmart. I refuse to do that. I'll throw on some shorts, a t-shirt, maybe just some tennis shoes or something, or even some slides, but I do not wear pajamas out.
So I'm like, you can't even move around. Like if something goes wrong, a man walks in here with a gun and we got to defend our families as a whole, you can't even move and groove because you got on Crocs. And I know it's an unpopular opinion, but in my personal opinion, you don't need to be that damn comfortable everywhere you go.
The hypermedication of young men from in the core curriculum.
Yeah, if you have an award ceremony, you need to pop up
we learn
clean.
about toxic masculinity from ages 8 in public schools in California and in New York. We never talk about toxic femininity. Do you agree that there's toxic femininity as well?
Yeah, there's definitely toxic femininity. There's definitely toxic femininity. If I also put what toxic masculinity is, it's violent. It's massive physical violence. Right, if we're gonna do a definition, because a lot of these people who talk about toxic masculinity do not define this shit. There's obviously toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. Toxic masculinity is the testosterone and the ambition and just things like that, like the violence men are capable of without restraints of courage and protection and providing. If I looked at a toxic masculine society, I'm looking at Nazi Germany, a society that just says might makes right, social Darwinism, and that is just purely predicated off force, right? Force and disgust. If I also look at society that's toxic femininity, which is gossip, shaming, rallying, and envy, I'm looking at the Soviet Union, a society that sought to get rid of and to take away all the other classes in exchange for making everyone equally as poor.
Standard.
Why? Well, how can femininity not be toxic if masculinity can?
I'm not saying.
No, femininity can definitely be toxic. I just brought it up. If there was a man who was toxic in masculinity, if we're going to use that definition, it'd be a guy who's just constantly trying to shove his weight around, constantly just says stuff like might makes right, even though he's not most likely going to say it out loud, but he's going to have the ideal that might makes right. If you're stronger than the other person, dominate them, make them submit to you, things of that nature. And he doesn't have any ideas, or he doesn't believe in protecting and providing courage, trying to help people weaker than you and to use your influence and strength to help others, right? He just believes in his own self and is very selfish. The toxic feminine, right? The toxic femininity would be constant envy, gossip, shaming, rallying, the idea and the actions of trying to destroy another's reputation because you are jealous of what they have. That's what toxic femininity would be. And I already mentioned that in how I compare toxic masculinity to the Nazis and how I connected toxic femininity to the Soviet Union. or communism.
They
as a
can't
whole.
be. I
Do
think
we
they
teach
come-
kids about toxic femininity in our schools?
Oh, they
No,
definitely
tell me
don't.
yes or no.
I mean, I think that they come from two very different places. I think toxic masculinity comes from a level of misogyny, where I think toxic femininity often comes from a reaction to a misogynistic system, which fundamentally
I
oppresses
disagree.
and systematically oppresses women.
In this patriarchy that's oppressive to women, men do all of the hard, dirty, dangerous jobs.
I don't know. Like, there's no, like, okay, let's say we live in a patriarchy that's oppressive to women, which definitely is not the case. Women get to choose. Women can do anything a man can do, essentially. They can work like a man. There's no wage gap. That doesn't exist anymore, right? Once upon a time it did, but it's been patched. Women can say things a man could never say online and just completely get away with it, especially if she's attractive, right? It's way easier for women to just get through school because the education system is predicated towards them, right? Like, there's no way that women are the ones being oppressed in this society, right? There's no way that they're the ones being, if we're talking about Western society, Canada, the United States, Britain, things of that nature, there's no way women are the ones who are being inherently oppressed. There's no way.
Jobs that make up 92% of workplace deaths because we want to oppress women. In this oppressive patriarchy, we invented modern medicine to make sure that women are safer during childbirth. We invented birth control so that women can have sex with
Women
people.
can have sex as much as they want without having to worry about the consequences of children. We've invented, we've invented the welfare system that is way more predicated towards women and single mothers. We allow women, we normalize dating apps, which means women basically get to choose who they want to be with and they get to pick the top of the top. So how are women the ones being prejudiced against and discriminated against when it seems like they have the pick of the litter for the most part?
People without having to worry about having children. We have all these welfare programs that you damn near have to be a woman to even get. Scholarships, homeless shelters, exclusive for women. These are all things that the oppressive patriarchy created for the exclusive benefit of women. I just think that it's very interesting that some people think that a system that is so brutal to men is somehow created to oppress women.
I'm not saying
Doesn't
that
make
toxic
sense to
femininity is a good thing, but I'm saying it's a much more understood and valid reaction to a system of oppression versus toxic masculinity, which
But women aren't oppressed now. They're not oppressed. Women are not oppressed. If he was talking about, like, I don't know, Pakistan or Afghanistan or something, okay, now we have actually something to discuss, right? There's more weight in your argument, but we're talking about the Western world. And from my points that I've already stated, women are not oppressed now.
Okay. So even if I grant you that,
They're clapping like seals. Brother, England is cooked.
are they teaching toxic? Is that term ever been used in a school?
No, I've never heard. I go to school in Texas, right? To be fair, I have not heard toxic masculinity be taught in schools. I haven't heard that, right? Because I feel like if you're going in a more conservative area, you're not going to hear stuff like that. Like he was talking about how they teach that in New York and California. Those are both more liberal areas, more liberal states, if you will. I haven't heard that in Texas, right? However, I'd wager that in these schools, these schools that are talking about toxic masculinity, I've never heard toxic femininity be used. Besides in these type of like red pill masculinity spaces, right? Never heard it.
Toxic femininity.
And even if they aren't being taught in schools, toxic masculinity and toxic femininity would both be equally as bad, right?
No, it's not.
Oh, that's weird.
What would you say to somebody that hasn't tried therapy before?
Just ask yourself if what you're doing in your life right.
So only one sex gets criticized and called toxic. Maybe that creates a backlash.
Because one is creating a system of
Oh,
oppression.
no, that's
The
your
other is reaction to
interpretation.
it.
No, you can make every excuse under the book that you'd like, but only one chromosome set gets criticized, called that they're terrible and awful, and that women basically need to be like go into the corporate world with no reservation, and young men see this pattern in the West and in our country from the authors, from the curriculum, from the music, from the movies, and we see, and of course, again, in the educational system proper, we have seen the infantilization of the young male. And so it's just, again, we know the data, you did agree to it, that young men are checking out completely, but we're actually living under a hyper-feminist West that is toxic. What does that mean?
Definitely.
Speech police, feelings first.
Feelings first, speech police, cancel culture, welfare, things of that nature. We're living in a hyper-feminist West.
Emotion over reason, community over individualism.
One of the worst parts about prioritizing emotions is it restricts you from the truth. Part of the masculine pursuit is trying to get to the truth.
If you put emotions over logic in every scenario, you're going to drive in. If you put emotions above reasoning, logic, and just how to maneuver in life, if you use your emotions to maneuver through life, you will go insane. You will go insane.
Sometimes to get to the truth, you have to be willing to be offended, because the truth is sometimes pretty offensive. But that doesn't mean that it's not the truth. So we've abandoned our pursuit of truth in order to coddle emotions, and that's a dangerous place to be in.
Is the West stronger as it's become more feminine in the last 30 years?
Absolutely not. The United States has gotten weaker. We can see that now. During the 80s and 90s, or after the Soviet Union collapsed and the collapse of the Eastern Bloc as a whole, America was the undisputed hegemon. They govern the world. And as America has gotten weaker, we've seen wars spread across the Middle East, wars in Ukraine, and China's starting to make its move now that the West is getting weaker.
In fact, our morale is weaker. We're more suicidal. Our fertility rates are down. We have lost the balance. We've lost the yin and the yang between the male and the female. We lost what worked, and we have hyper-platformed. Your own prime minister, Boris Johnson, when he was talking at a summit, said we need to actually make things more feminine. Could you imagine if he said we need to make things more masculine? How does that sound to a dock worker in Brighton or someone in Essex?
He would have gotten crucified for that.
So we need to make things
obviously crucifixion is an exaggeration, but he would have gotten shunned.
More feminine? No. Instead, we need to restore the balance that God created man and women, and right now they're. And by the way, you want an example? Adolescence. How does that movie Adolescence not broadly generalize a theme that, first of all, doesn't exist, secondly, is like a slow motion like humiliation ritual for the young boys of Britain? Could you imagine if there was a similar movie criticizing young women that are like how they are the ones that are driving men away, about how catty they are, about how they don't want to be. No, it's fine.
How they're hoes that prioritize capitalism over family. That's a big deal.
I'll just complete the point. I could give you data point after data point, and I would ask you the question: has the West grown stronger the more effeminate has become?
No, it's grown weaker.
Okay. You've said a lot.
Yes, that's how a Q&A works. You ask the question and I answer, so I am the speaker. You know that's how it works.
Okay, so on your point about adolescence, I don't think adolescence is a generalization. We're not saying that every young boy in the UK is like this. We're not saying every young boy goes through this process. It's an example.
I feel like adolescence is a movie. From what I understand, I haven't seen it.
Of what can happen when people fall into this kind of media. I think it's like, and it's more of a story or a warning to what can happen to people that, you know, fall into these bubbles, who don't find the help that they necessarily need, that can turn violent. And like, this is a perfect example of toxic masculinity, in which the boy feels like he's not affirmed in his masculinity and takes that out on women. Like that, we've also then seen, like, within men, like the largest contributor to like men's deaths right now is male suicide. Like, but I would argue that is not a factor of feminization, but instead a factor of masculinity.
I don't understand how that. Okay, right? How would a man going into masculinity and toxic masculinity want to then commit suicide as a result of masculinity? Wouldn't it be femininity, toxic femininity, that rejects the masculine, rejects courage, rejects family over capitalism, emotion, and things of that nature? Wouldn't the rejection of masculine ideas and thought patterns contribute to men being more depressed, more anxious, and more upset? So they would then loop around to, some would go to like toxic masculine behavior and saying, we don't like women, we don't like this, that, and the third, might make right, things of that nature. Wouldn't that how it would work? That the toxic femininity pushes the man towards a toxic masculine? Because why would a man go to toxic masculine immediately and he commits suicide? Oh, it's just toxic masculinity. I feel like it would be toxic femininity pushes the masculine towards toxic masculinity. Wouldn't that's how that would work? Because if a man is demonized for his inherent traits in biology, he's gonna be like, you know what? Screw this. I'm gonna go the complete opposite route away from this.
Idea that men can't be in touch with their feelings. You talked about feelings
Well, if that's the case, why weren't suicide rates higher when men were more masculine?
being
Yeah.
feminine.
Cause if we're living in a feminist society, right? Let's say, oh, men are so more in touch with their feelings. Men are more in touch with their feelings. They're happier. Then why are suicide rates as high as they are? Why are they so high? Why are so many men feel anxious? Why do so many men have no ambition, no courage, no drive, no nuance about life? In this hyper-feminist society where men are quote-unquote more in tune with their emotions, wouldn't they be happier? More willing to work? More happy? No, they're not. Because the system is against the masculine. It's against men.
So men are simply not allowed to engage with their feelings at all. Like men not allowed to talk about their feelings. These are large contributors to a massive problem within men's spaces that lead to what is the highest contributor to men's death, suicide. And I think this idea that, men simply go back to work and if they're economically assured, then suddenly everything is fine. And, men's mental health was never an issue before like the 90s or whatever it was when we used to start affirming men's mental health, I think is an unfair it's an unfair point to make, and I think it doesn't speak to a lot of issues that a lot of young men face, and I think it's a dishonest way to go about talking about this conversation.
Yeah, you don't solve issues that young men face by telling young men to talk about the issues that they face.
Yeah, you can talk about your issues all you want, but if you don't take action, it's not going to help you, right? You can talk about, oh, I'm sad, I'm depressed. Okay, you got off your chest, but are you going to do something about it, right? Are you going to take actionable steps? It's action, man. You can talk all you want about your emotions and your feelings, but you have to take action. You have to take actual actionable steps. Just talking is not going to do anything. You got to take action. All right? Imagine if I made a whole bunch of videos, got them all recorded, and I never uploaded them. There's no point.
Men have to solve their problems. Actually, too, and this is a biological difference between men and women, there's a hormonal difference. Men deal with stress, and men alleviate stress by solving their problems. This is a real thing. You can look it up, by the way.
They do.
Women alleviate their stress by talking about their problems.
When you're stressed, if a woman can talk about what she's feeling, what she's missing, what she's not getting, that will actually raise her estrogen level, and her stress levels will go down. Now, if a man is stressed and he talks about his feelings, his stress will only increase. That's a big because every time a man is stressed, he'll stop talking.
If I'm stressed or I'm like going through it, you're not going to hear me talk like that. I'm just going to shut up and work like that. I'm just going to work, bro. I ain't going to lie.
And when he stops talking, women panic because they don't know different. And they want to go in there. What are you feeling? What's going on? And if he starts talking, he'll just feel worse and worse and worse. And if he's a little frustrated with her, annoyed with her, and he sort of backs off, he's mulling it over in order to let it go. Just like a woman would talk about things to let it go.
The Western ideology over the past 60 years has been, because there's a small minority of men that are violent, all men should behave like women. And by the way, when I say a small minority, I mean about 1% of men are actually violent criminals. So even how he thinks you should solve the issue by just having men sit around in a corner and talk about their feelings.
Yeah, fuck that. Nah, I ain't doing none of that. If I got a problem, we gonna get to work. If I got a missing assignment, I'm not gonna talk about school's so hard, I hate school. Nah, nigga, we gonna get them headphones in, turn on that yeet, and get to work, bro. Turn some assignments in, bro. I ain't gonna lie. If I don't got money in my account, make 50 videos in a day, get right to work. Talking about it's not gonna help. For me, it doesn't help. You just gotta work through it, bro.
And cry, that doesn't help boys. Boys need to be active. We need to be dynamic. You know who doesn't shoot up a school? Usually the captain of the football team. You don't see the captain of the football team shooting up a school because he has structure.
You don't even see the guy who's popular shooting up the school. You don't see the guy who's happy with his life shooting up a school. The guys shooting up schools are the guys who no friends, low status, most likely bullied. Right? Those are the guys doing those type of actions.
He has competition. He has a place to put his anger into passion and channel it into creation. Boys need to produce. So when you tell young boys to just sit around and talk about their problems and cry about their problems, it doesn't make them better. It actually makes them more stressed out and it makes them worse off.
Let's go to the point about mass suicide and masculinity not being allowed to
So to your point, if it was true that men have always been miserable, why have the suicide rates gone up?
Right.
Well, because we've
Yeah, if men have always been miserable, right? Oh, every man back in the day was miserable. Then why are suicide rates higher than they were back in the day? Something doesn't correlate. It's because men back in the day were treated like men. They were treated like boys. Society expected men to be men. They didn't expect men to try to be women and things of that nature.
started recording suicides better. It's not to say that suicides didn't occur on this level. It's just we simply have better ways of recording. And
That's rubbish. Body bags are data that transcends any
Body bags are data, right?
sort of manipulation.
Right.
It was a self-inflicted gun wound or being hung. It was not like a mass reporting issue 60 years ago.
60 years ago, 50 years ago, they could report that. Your only argument against they couldn't record that stuff was hundreds upon hundreds, 100 years ago, but that's not what he's talking about. And if we talk about masculinity, we're most likely talking about 1900s all the way to the modern era. 50, 60 years ago, they could record that. You're telling me they couldn't report a suicide in the 60s, 50s, or 70s? That's rubbish. That's cap. You know they could report that.
In this country or in the West. It is a material fact because we know it's happening in the Anglosphere. It's happening in Australia, it's happening in America, It's happening all across Europe, that suicide rates of men are going up. Depression is going up.
Yes.
They are correlated together. It's not a reporting issue. There's something undergirding it. And in fact,
Correlation. Depression and suicide go hand in hand.
just one other thing, your own prime minister endorsed adolescence. He sent out a tweet saying, I was shocked to the core when I watched this film and everyone should watch it. So that is an endorsement from the top leader, other than, the king of this country, of endorse. I don't even know, may the king endorse that.
I mean, an endorsement's not generalization.
Well, hold on. No. He said, I'm troubled to the core of what this could become. And you have to, again, that is one example of thousands that I could give, one that is the most applicable to here to this country. And I guess I would just ask this question in closing. Do you think men would be happier if they are married and providing for a family?
Yes. I think that's a yes. Because as a man, you need something to fight for. You need something to protect as a man, right? That's why men, we set these big goals. It's like, as a man, if I didn't have a goal to make $1 million, I didn't have a goal to, get in the best shape of my life. I didn't have a goal to bench 300 pounds. I didn't have a goal to get all my platforms to at least 100K. I'd be miserable. Because it's like, yeah, I have everything from a material standpoint, but there's no reason to work if I don't have anything to aspire towards, right? That's why men set these huge goals. That's why men problem solve. That's why men need to take action, right? I am happier working. Right now, I am happier making this video, recording, talking into a microphone, editing these videos than I am if I was just playing the game all day. And I'm happier because I know I'm working towards something. I know that I'm actually putting in the effort to get somewhere in my life. I'm happier working on schoolwork, having to learn, than I am laying around all day watching reels. Because even though the school stuff is hard and sometimes it's not fun, the entire process is making me better. It's making my mind sharper. It's making me have to learn, making me having to adapt to new information. If I'm just laying around watching reels all day, I'm miserable because I know I'm doing something that's not helping me get towards my goals. So yes, I do think that the vast majority of men are happier when they have a beautiful wife or just a woman they love in general and a family that they need to work and protect for. It gives you something to work for, right?
I don't think marriage or the institution of marriage is the only way a man can be happy.
That's not the question.
Happier. Do you think men will be generally happier if they're...
Yeah, generally. It's not, oh, well, every man is it. No, it's a general question. If 100 men were in a room, how many of this, like if it's general, would the majority of them be happy with a wife and a kid and a stable job, protecting and providing for their family, or no? That's the question.
Married, providing, and have children.
I don't think that's a necessary factor to contribute to men's happiness.
That is a part of happiness. It's fulfillment. You are fulfilled if you have a family you love and care about. You are fulfilled if you're working a job that you don't like, but you know is helping your family. So what would make a man happy if that's not it?
What is your solution to bring about male happiness in the West?
My solution is something along his lines. Bringing back marriage, making the courts not as biased for women, right? Bringing back manufacturing and industrial jobs in the West so men actually have stable work, right? Things of that nature.
Mine is men
giving people more free will in schools, right? Giving people more free wills. If you want to be on your phone, you want to mess up, that's you. That's your choice. Allow people greater decision making.
Get married, have children, and provide. What is yours?
Kids cry, men cry, boys should cry.
I think an affirmation of their emotions.
There it is.
Nope, that's not gonna work. It just doesn't work. We've tried. We're doing it right now, and look how sad men are. Nope, not gonna work.
Called it. I promise I have not seen this video yet, and I called it because that's the only solution that they have.
The solution is to just cry about your emotions. That doesn't help. It doesn't help. It doesn't. I've tried. It doesn't work. That message doesn't work. The solution, if you're going through stuff, at least in my case, hit the gym. You might have to sit in a room for like 20-30 minutes just stinking. Maybe listen to like an old R&B song that makes you cry and then get back to work. Like, that's low-key. Meditate. Like, that's low-key the solutions, bro. I ain't gonna lie.
Behave like girls and act like girls and express their emotions like girls, or they're not good men. If boys don't behave like girls because there are a small minority of boys that are violent, then that must mean that they're violent, and that means that they're toxically masculine. That's not how life works for young men. Young men could be on the side of the road literally dying if they don't help themselves, if they don't learn how to help themselves. The world doesn't care. The world doesn't care about a young man crying. Women can be emotional because if a woman's on the side of the road and she's crying, somebody's going to pull over and help her. If a woman's crying online, somebody's always going to come save the day. But that's not how men operate. And if you want a man to feel useless and want to drive him into suicide, tell him to just cry about his problems instead of solving his problems.
That doesn't work because men are not women and women are not men.
To allowing men to express themselves in whichever way they want, even if that is in a more effeminate way or a Western typically effeminate way. I don't think it's about ostracization. I don't think it's about
men express themselves through creation, not through crying.
Promoting one simple institution of living and disregarding.
The problem with his argument, this guy's argument, is that, oh yeah, men need to be more in tune with their emotions. And guess what? We are. If we're looking at this, yes, men can express themselves. They can say what they want to say. You don't need to be masculine anymore. And men are more depressed than they ever have been. There are higher suicide rates than there ever has been. Men are weaker than they ever have been. So this way of thinking, it doesn't work. He's trying to use a woman's actions, like the actions that would work for women on a man, but women and men are different on a psychological and biological, my apologies, biological factors. So it just doesn't work.
All of those else, men are free to live single, men are free to be in gay relationships. I don't think that the institution of marriage privileges one to a life of happiness over any other way of living.
So
yeah,
of course
so
you have the
stupid.
agency to do
That's
that.
so stupid.
With all due respect, have you been to London the last 10 years? Men can do whatever they want.
I live in them.
Are they happier? Men can dress how they want. Men can act how they want. And go to any club. Has it worked?
Yeah, but
no.
Also we've had austerity.
Generally, it has not worked.
Factors outside of simply.
You see what you're doing, respectfully. You're scrambling for an excuse to get away from the truth that's right in front of you.
I mean,
maybe men should get married and have children.
Okay, but I think
because it's worked for 2,000 years.
Yeah, but for that to work, we have to get the government out of our families. The government cannot be involved in our love lives. They should not be legislating our love lives. We have to get the government out of family. We got to get the government out of dictating who gets to see their children. A man shouldn't have to go through a government system in order to see his own children. That's absolutely crazy. You have a society of men who just feel like they are slaves and that they are powerless about their own destiny. When you can't even control your own house, how do you feel like you have any control over anything else in the world? Family is the first order of governance, and if you don't know what leadership looks like inside of your house, you're not going to know what good leadership looks like outside of your house. Exactly. And that's why we have so many bad leaders. And by the way, I think that this has been done on purpose to neuter men.
Oh, it's 100% on purpose. It's not coincidence. No, it's 100% on purpose.
So powerless.
I talked about this in my I actually haven't posted the video yet, but I talked about that in my what Collapse of White America video. You feel me?
Even in their own homes when they work hard.
I'm actually thinking about making like a third channel, because first channel's like commentary videos where I make my own stuff. Jay's there's where I react, and then Jay speaks, right? Or spiritual Jay or eternal Jay or whatever I want to call that, is where I just speak about my thoughts and the country and philosophy and stuff like that.
For their families.
Interesting. Can I challenge you on that though? Why is it that the men of much poorer African and Asian countries don't have suicide, issues, yet they have no money.
How do we know?
Because traditional societies, they're more traditional societies, right? And when a society is more traditional, guess what? Marriage is incentivized. Men are respected to work. And since men have an outlet for their anger, they have an outlet for their testosterone and their feelings, and they have something to provide for and something to protect, they're more happier. Because men need duty. Men need responsibilities, right? If I didn't have responsibilities, I'd be miserable. Because now I'm not bound to anything. I'm not bound to protect. I'm not bound to be better, right? You, as a man, are incentivized to better yourself and to make money and to be courageous for the hopes that you can have a good marriage and have a family that you can take care of. And if you take away the family and the marriage aspect of it, why would I go through all these traditionally masculine things and put in all this effort if there's no reward for them? Why would I work hard in the field for hours upon hours a day if I'm not going to get paid for it? Why would I work out and hit the gym if I'm still not going to get a partner, right? That's just how it works.
Well, we know, again, by empirical third-party reported data from the UN, from the US State Department, there is not a suicide crisis in sub-Saharan Africa.
There's not a suicide crisis in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's not a suicide crisis in Zimbabwe, Zambia. Those areas are not suffering from those type of areas.
Crisis in Southeast Asia with young men.
Because they're
so
based.
Explain to me that phenomenon. They're materially wealthy. They're not materially wealthy, and yet they're harming themselves. So why would you then say it's austerity?
Wait, sorry, say that again.
Okay, you're looking for another explanation for male unhappiness.
Yes.
I'm pointing to you to a part of the world that actually does value marriage and does have children, but they have no money. So therefore,
like
how could you
Sub-Saharan Africa is the Sub-Saharan Africa, the countries that are less materially wealthy have higher birth rates, right?
say it is a material problem why the men of London, who can dress how they want, go to whatever bar they want, are not happy?
Because it's more than one reason. Like, there are multiple factors. It's not just like, it's not even just economic. There's economic, there's social, there's like religious pressures. There's so many, like, you cannot boil down a societal issue to like one.
And I acknowledge that, right? I even at the beginning, remember, I'm saying the biggest, the one that has an exponent on it, is that we have a biological urge that God gave us when he designed us, which is to be fruitful and multiply, for men to provide for the family.
Yep.
And when we suppress that,
and try attempt to get away with that, chaos erupts.
we say that you can go live whatever lifestyle you would like, as already happens in the West. We have Exhibit A. We have a serious suicide, mental health, anxiety, depression issue. So I would just ask you to think over the next couple of days, months, or years, why is it that men in countries that barely have toilets and do not have 2 pounds to rub together, but they do have kids and they do have a wife, are much happier than someone with a big flat in downtown London? Something to think about.
I mean, I think happiness is a difficult idea to conflate in that sense. I mean,
well, happiness has a bunch of factors, but marriage and family is a massive one. You can't expect a society to be happy and plentiful without family. The first guy don't need affirmation of emotions, and they need acknowledgement of their efforts. Absolutely. Absolutely. Bro walked out of bed. I will go to school in like some sweats, a shirt, and some slides. But even I gotta put on at least a polo shirt, some slacks. Can't just go to like an Oxford debate stadium with none of that, boy. Of the friend zone. Crazy. Yeah, but with that being said, that was that video. This is definitely a long one. This video about to be 50 minutes long, boy. I'll tell you that right now. But with that being said, shout out to Poor Man's Podcast. Shout out to the debate. But with that being said, it's your boy Jay. Stay healthy, stay wealthy, and stay blessed. It's your boy, and I'm out.